Community Science Lecture Series. The lecture series is a partnership project led by the Prince William Sound Science Center. Our partners include the UAF Alaska Sea Grant Extension Office, the Cordova chapter of the Prince William Sound Audubon Society, who hosts one lecture a month, and the Forest Service, who generously donates their building and equipment. My name is Meadow Scott. I organize the lectures. If you have any ideas for speakers or subjects for the future, please let me know afterward. I'm also going to pass around our clipboard sign-in sheet. If you could put your name down so we can keep track of attendance and continue to run this great community event, that would be great. Our speaker for tonight is Dr. Pete Rand, who works at the Science Center. He's going to be talking about his past research on the giant salmon of Japan. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Meadow. So, thanks everyone. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the work I've been doing. I'm going to kind of breeze through this. If you're interested in asking questions, please feel free to interrupt me. I want to make this as interactive as I can. So, yeah, feel free to jump in with any questions. This is work that I've been doing for about 10 years now. So I'm a salmon scientist. I'm kind of a salmon nerd. I've done a lot of work over the years on salmon. I started studying salmon in the Great Lakes in Michigan and New York and Ohio, and then I've moved to the North Pacific, and then I've worked for a place called the Wild Salmon Center in Portland, Oregon, which does a lot of work internationally, and so that's where I got my start working with these fish. So this is kind of a non-technical presentation. There's a lot of photos. There's a little bit of information data that I've been collecting that I want to show you. But again, stop if you have any questions as I move on. I did make a slight change to the title of the presentation, Giant Salmon of Japan. It's not a salmon as you might think of it, like a red or a silver. It's in the salmon family, though, the salmonid family. And so these have different names. They're called taimen. In Japan, they're called ito. River wolf. Some people call them the river wolf. But they're notable in that they're the largest fish in this family. So I'm gonna hope that this works.
Can I turn the lights off for you, Pete?
Sure. Thank you. So I didn't know much about Japan about 10 years ago, and so I've really gotten really fascinated with the culture. The people there have been fantastic. And I've been able to spend a lot of time there over the years, and so I've gotten to know a little bit. I still can't really speak Japanese, but one of the things they did do is give me a name. This is a kind of a normal thing that I think folks in Japan do to make you feel welcome, and so they change your English characters in your name to Japanese characters, and so my last name is Rand, and so this is Rando. These are two characters that represent my name, and it's always got a meaning. So I was told it was Orchid Road, which I thought was like a great name to have. And then I was making a presentation like this to a group of colleagues, and I saw one Japanese Japanese colleague in the back, and he was kind of shaking his head, and he talked to me afterwards. He said, "No, it could mean this, but it also has another meaning, and the meaning is road to chaos." So I like Orchid Road better, but anyway, this is the North Pacific, and so I just want to orient you. I'm going to be showing you some maps and things, and the 60th parallel is shown there, and of course you know where Alaska is. I'm going to be focusing a lot of my work here in the Western Pacific, and so Japan, especially Hokkaido, and the river I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about is on the northern tip of the northern island, the Sarafutsu River, and then there's, this doesn't have a pointer, does it? No?
It does, and it works.
It does?
It's a little, you want me to turn the light on for a minute?
Yeah.
Close your eyes. It's a red.
Perfect. All right. So Yeah, so I did a lot of my work in Hokkaido here. I'm going to be referring to Sakhalin, which is the island just north. This is in the Russian Federation. Novatovsk, which is another, basically a Russian state here. And there's Kamchatka there. I've done a little bit of work there as well. The range of the species I'm going to be talking about, I'll show you a range map later, but they're found right in here. Okay. This is the taimen. This is the species I've been studying. Parahucho perii. It's a sea-run form. There's 5 species. This is the only one that spends part of its life history in the ocean. This is a popular article that was written a year ago. This is an experience that Ryan Peterson had fishing one of the streams that I do some work on, the Cody River. And it's also important to note that this river also has Siberian tiger, so it's pretty amazing to realize that salmon are mixing in with the range of the Siberian tiger.
Do the tigers eat them?
Yeah, I think they might, but I've talked to all these big cat biologists and they think they'll probably not. Right. I'm very curious about that. This is some of the photos I'm going to show you. I need to tell this for Tom's sake. These are not pictures that I took, but pictures that Japanese colleagues and Japanese photographers took. They were really excellent at this. And so this is the species during the reproductive phase, the spawning phase. And the males turn bright red and the female is shown here. This is bamboo. So this is riparian streamside vegetation, sasa bamboo. It's dwarf bamboo.
That's on Hokkaido Island, you think?
That's Hokkaido. So it's very unusual, really.
So bamboo lives that far north.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very unusual to see salmon swimming amongst the bamboo. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, Matter, you're right. This is counterintuitive. So this is, I just showed a bowl of ramen. So I grew up eating ramen in college, but this is not like the ramen I ate. So this is Japanese ramen, and I stay at a Japanese inn when I'm there, and I just get served the most amazing food. So just thought I'd show you this. This is another reason why I keep wanting to come back. So I often get the question of, why am I studying these fish and why am I working in Japan? So this is a kind of a conservation story. So these fish are threatened, and there's very little known about them. So I'm kind of, as a scientist and as a conservation biologist, I'm just drawn to this kind of problem. It's a umbrella species. So this is a kind of a top apex predator in the system. So if you're protecting taimen, you're protecting the larger food web. The species is threatened. There's multiple threats. Habitat loss and degradation is important. There's recreational fishing. There's also, the fish spend some time, as I mentioned, in the ocean, and they're caught as bycatch in the commercial salmon fishery as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. They're an important natural and cultural symbol of Japan. It's a relatively small group, but there's a group that's really love these fish. Spend a lot of time walking the streams. So it's been great to get to know them. And it's economically important. There's a lot of recreational fishing for these species within Japan. It's very popular pastime. So this is the salmonid family, and so I don't want to spend too much time here, but most of the fish we think about are the salmon, trout, and char, which is on this side of the family tree, and then there's these Asian endemic fish. Salmon is found only in Asia, Brachymystax and huko, and the sea-run taimen, or ito, are considered a huko, although they've been put into a separate genus, Parahuko. And they're thought to be kind of an ancient salmonid, so you have to probably go back 20 3 million years to find a common ancestor, and then they evolved from that, but they've kept a lot of the ancestral traits, so they're considered a more primitive or ancient salmonid. And as I mentioned, there's very little known about them. They're not very abundant. There hasn't been a lot of research done on them. So as I mentioned, habitat loss and degradation. It's been amazing to see what's been lost, and this is a picture taken in Japan. So much of the natural habitat has been converted. There's a lot of small and large size dams, and a lot of water's been taken out for agriculture, and so there's definitely a lot of habitat that's been lost, particularly in the range in Japan. In Russia, a lot of the habitat is intact, but there's certain threats. One of them is oil and gas development. So this is a pipeline crossing in Sakhalin. That's that island just north of Japan. And as you can just see by looking at it, it's not very stable infrastructure. There's always a potential risk of oil spills through these pipelines. This is a picture of fish taken in the Sarafutsu. So this is the name of the river that I work in Japan. This is the lower river. So this is what they look like. And fishing peaks in spring, right after the spawning period, and also there's a lot of fishing in the fall as well. And the fishing is intense. I'll show you some information on that.
Is it catch and release only when it's recreational, or can they harvest?
There are absolutely no regulations.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And you don't even need a fishing license. So I'll get to that. They are actually protected in other parts of their range, but not this river. So this is the commercial fishery. This is what it looks like in Russia and also in Japan. So they use trap nets. So this is different than what you see here. This is a picture taken in Bristol Bay. But these are basically trap nets, so the fish are swimming along the coast, hit these leads, and then go in and get trapped here. Mostly targeting pink and chum salmon, but the fishery also bycatches other species, including caiman. So this is the trap net here, and the fish are brought to shore. These are chum salmon, but occasionally you do find other species. So these are char. These are white-spotted char, and then this is a taimen here. This is a starry flounder. So this is one of the biggest questions I have is how many taimen are caught in the commercial fisheries bycatch. I don't really have an answer to that. And then you probably heard reports of a lot of illegal fishing or poaching in the Russian Far East, and it is pretty dramatic. I've seen it in almost every river that I've worked on. So this is a gill net. You often see this gill net just strung across the river. And they're basically collecting every fish from a run, and this is what it looks like. And so they basically, it's a roe fishery, so they strip they just target the females, strip the eggs, salt them, and then it's mostly, I think it ends up mostly in Moscow. It doesn't, I don't think it gets across the border. I think most of it stays in Russia. But this is a dramatic thing that's happening, and taimen are also targeted in some areas. This is an example of one we found in an abandoned gill net. This was a number of years ago. This was a female in the spring. So I just want to go over some kind of basic biology on these fish. So this is Michio Fukushima. He is not named after the nuclear power plant, but he's a scientist that works for the equivalent of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, in Japan. And he's been studying these fish for over 20 years, so he's really knowledgeable, and he's a great person to work with. So I've been working very closely with him over the years. These are just some growth information I put. So this is length of fish. This is in centimeters over age. So these fish can, the oldest age fish is close to 20. There's been Siberian taimen that have been aged over 30 years old, so they can be very long-lived. Relatively slow growing when you compare it with Pacific salmon, but their final sizes can be quite large. So I've seen fish, about 3 feet long, basically, over a meter long. But there's been reports of fish 200 pounds, 2 meters long. They can get very, very large. And as you can see, some of them grow slowly. We think this is a relatively cold stream here in eastern Hokkaido, and growth is probably slowed. These are Russian rivers where growth is a little faster. We also use otoliths. Many of you might know what otoliths are. These are calcium carbonate structures in the brain case of the fish. They're used for aging, so they have rings. It's like estimating the age of a tree, but you can use it to age fish as well. And then the chemistry laid down in each one of these rings gives you a way of knowing when the fish was in fresh water and when it moved to salt water and when it came back to fresh water. And so we've done this with fish from a number of different streams. And the take-home message is some of them are anadromous, some of them spend probably roughly 5 or 6 years in fresh water, then they go to the ocean. And then they come back in freshwater to spawn. But there's others that are completely freshwater resident. They never go to the ocean.
Since you enter a perch, do they go back and forth every year to the ocean?
We don't know. We don't know if they skip spawns. There's no information.
There's some up and down there on the stress and calcium ratio.
Right. So these bumps here might suggest they're going back and forth. We think some people think they might overwinter in the ocean. There's been no real good work on that. So there's still a lot of open questions about this. But it is clear that some of them never make it into the ocean. They spend their entire life in fresh water, and others are more migratory. These are data collected. These are bycatch data collected from the pink salmon fishery in Russia and the Sea of Japan. So this is the number of taimen caught in the fishery in tons from 1950 to this series stops in about the mid-90s. But this is pretty alarming drop in bycatch that suggests that the abundance of these fish is probably declining. Reporting here is probably not very good, and we have basically very little reporting in the last 10, 15 years. So as I mentioned, we don't really know the current rate of bycatch in the fishery, but if this is a good indicator of the abundance, then it's a good indication that the population is declining. Michio Fukushima, I mentioned earlier, and I worked on a paper with some other colleagues, and we identified where the most stable populations are in Japan and which ones are most at risk. And so these rivers here shown in gray and black are the best rivers left, basically. We think they have a relatively stable population. All these other rivers here used to have, including Honshu and the main island here, used to have taimen, but they're no longer found in many of these streams. So there's only these eastern populations here, and then the Soya Peninsula, where I've been working, are the only rivers that still have stable populations. The Japanese, over many years, have been studying these rivers, particularly the ones in the north. This is maybe helping with one of the spawning ground surveys. So every spring, there's a group that volunteer, and they walk the streams and count the number of spawners. So it's relatively easy to get around on snow. A lot of this bamboo vegetation basically lies flat under the snow, so it's relatively easy to travel around and count these fish. So that's been done for a while. This is a picture of me. I hand caught this fish. Sometimes the males get in very shallow water, they're very easy to catch. But this is what the streams look like during the spawning period. It's right as the snow is melting is when they reproduce. So I hold a position with IUCN. We try to update all the listings for salmonids on the IUCN red list. And so I pulled together all of the experts that were studying the taimen and brought together all the data. And basically the idea was to characterize the status. How threatened are these fish? And IUCN uses a number of different categories from least concern all the way up to critically endangered or extinct. And so we spent a number of years pulling together all this information. And this is what we found. We basically concluded that the species is highly threatened, critically endangered, and we added it to the red list in 2006 with a series of conservation recommendations. Part of that was to do some research, and so since that time we've been focusing on 3 rivers, 2 that I've already mentioned here, the Sarafutsu River here in Japan. This is the Kopi River in Russia, and then there's a number of rivers in northeast Sakhalin that also have relatively healthy populations. So those green rivers shown here are the ones that have the healthiest, most abundant populations. The streams in red and orange are ones that have either very low population or no population at all. So the basic strategy here is that let's try to do some research and try to protect the species in at least these 3 river systems. Just to give you a sense of scale too, I was looking at the watershed area, and so we think Kopi is a big river, but it's certainly not anywhere close to the size of the Copper River. So I compared watershed area, and it's about 1/10 the size of the Copper. So it's relatively small compared to that big river system. And Sarafutsu is probably, it's about it's a much smaller stream. It's very, very small compared to the Kopi. So we have basically one simple objective. We wanted to estimate the size of the spawning run in this tributary and try to establish a baseline and compare it to some visual observations that were made by the Japanese in the past. We wanted to apply some new technology. I get the question of, how do I get support for this kind of work? So I had some fellowship support from Fulbright and from Japan agency here, Japanese Society for the Promotion of Science in Fulbright, Japan. There's been some corporate support from Toyo and from Oji. Oji is a paper company that owns some forests in the watershed. I'll get back to them in a minute. And this is an important local group, conservation group, the Ito Conservation Council, that we work very closely with. So I just want to talk to you about 2 recent years. So I was able to go and spend time in the field and working up the data. I spent 3 months in 2013 and another 3 months in 2014. This is the river system, and I just wanted to contrast the weather conditions during these years. So 2013 is blue, a very, very cold year with with a lot of snowpack and cold weather conditions. And 2014 was much warmer with very little rain, lots more sun. And this is the little dam that we worked on. This river is in really good shape, actually, but there is only one small dam on one of the tributaries. The tributary is called Kadibetsu, and we had a site here where we were using sonar. We set up a DIDSIN, which is an imaging sonar, and we were able to basically count all the adults coming up the stream each spring. We were also able to count the fish coming down after spawning. So we did basically the same monitoring it in 2 years, and we're able to estimate the size of the spawning run each year. Many of you, I know about this technology. These are sonar units. They're about this big. They're like they act like acoustic cameras. So you put them underwater, and they give you a visual image using sound, much like they produce information like a video camera. So you're able to count fish even if the water is murky like this, and even at night. You can get very accurate estimates of fish passing. And so we set up this equipment here. This is a computer and a battery setup, and then the sonar was put in the water here, and then the beam went across the river, and we were able to count the fish going by. It's pretty neat technology. This is what it looks like. This is a still, but it's running continuously and produces video-like information. And so these are 2 adults passing upstream. There was also a smaller minnow cyprinid that was migrating a little bit later during the season, but we were able to easily distinguish those from time then, just based on size. So here is what we were able to estimate in terms of numbers. So this is, I apologize this isn't labeled, but this is the number of fish passing our site every day for about a month migration period. And then the blue bars here are the 2013 numbers, and then that was the cold year, as I mentioned, and the red bars are the 2014 numbers. And so this was the total estimate. So we got 335 the first year, 405 the second year, slightly higher number. Patterns were a little different. As you might expect in a cold water year, the fish showed up later. We had a very severe cold front move in here, and we seem to think that might have slowed the fish down.
What kind of temperatures?
I'm sorry, what?
So how cold?
They started about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius.
Can you translate?
Yeah, that's just over freezing.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So,
And they spawn at about 5 degrees, so it's extremely cold water conditions.
What happened on the 29th of April? Was there big rain that day or something?
Well, this was high water here.
But there was a peak in one day where you got over 100 fish.
Right, so I think this held fish up for a while. It was flood conditions, and the flows were very strong through our site, and we think they might have built up, and then all of it, one day we got over 140 fish passed through. So I think that might have been because the fish were held back in the lower river.
Is it tidal induced?
No. So this is quite far upstream. So
Okay.
this is well above that. Yeah. And then work was done also last spring, but the data haven't been worked up, so I don't know what that looks like right now. So we did this, and this is, as I mentioned, one tributary in a larger watershed. So we can extrapolate this based on the spawning habitat in the entire watershed, and we think this is about a third of the entire run. So we're talking about maybe 1,000 fish in the entire river, which is important as we try to evaluate the potential impact of fishing in the lower river. So this is my sort of rough idea of what the population might look like, and some of the sources of mortality. Let me try to explain this to you. So this is the adult population. As I mentioned, we've got maybe about 1,000 adults in the spawning run each year, and that's based on our count times 3. And then there's some fish dying naturally. We do see some mortalities following spawning. There's some being lost as bycatch along the coast. We have no idea. Somebody mentioned it might be around 30 or 40 a year, but we still don't have a really good handle on that. And then there's primarily a catch and release sport fishery in the lower river. Again, this happens right after the spawning period and also in the fall. There was a creel survey done where the fishermen were interviewed, and they estimated each year about 1,200 fish caught. So that 1,200 fish is probably a lot of these fish, but also probably subadult fish that haven't gotten old enough to spawn yet. So based on our best guess, we think about 60% of the adults in the population are caught each year, which is pretty high. And based on a similar study done in a really remote river with a different species, Siberian taimen, they're related, but they thought maybe a sustainable catch rate for sport fishery would be closer to like 10%. So, and as I mentioned, there's basically currently no fishing regulations in Japan. In this situation, the regulations were set at the local level, basically by the mayor of the town. So we've been talking a lot with the mayor, talking about our research and recommending regulations to protect the fish. There is a lot of social pressure in Japan to do the right thing, though. So all observations I've made over the years, I've never seen fish killed. And I've always seen fish treated well. But there's always talk about bad players. Some people may be fishing at night and taking home trophy fish. It's hard to know, but there's some people who think that there's definitely some bad actors here.
Are they able to get any samples off of the caught fish, like otoliths, and getting some age data in the population?
There's a reluctance to kill any fish for otoliths. They've been taking some scale.
But if they're catching that many fish,
Yeah.
they should require the people to turn in like the head or something.
Right. Well, we've recovered some mortalities. We've been able to get, and we've also got fish from the trap net fishery as well. And so we've been able to recover some samples. So there's certainly a great opportunity to do a tagging study here, and so there's been a lot of discussions about this and engaging anglers more in this issue. So I think that's going to change. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about conservation efforts. So these are, just as we have discussions here in town in Cordova about fish passage and improving conditions of fish passage, there's a lot of interest, particularly among local conservation groups, to improve passage, and this is keeping these culverts clear, especially during the spawning season, to allow taimen and other fish to reach the spawning grounds. There's been some dam modifications. Everywhere you go in Japan, you see these low dams that are meant to control sediment. I don't think they really do, but they're all over the place, and they often prevent fish from migrating up to the spawning grounds. And so there's been efforts now to build these little fishways to allow fish, and that's been successful. There's these perch culverts. These are culverts that are pass water okay, but don't pass fish very well, and so these are elevated from the surface of the stream and present a challenge for fish. So I just made these observations 2 years ago, and I noticed this, went upstream, and I saw 2 taimen that their heads were damaged because they struck the side of this culvert. So this is a female and a male with big wounds on the top of their head, top of the skull. And so I think there's been work now to try to improve this to allow better passage. This is another part of the river. This was a culvert, a fish-friendly example of a fish-friendly culvert with a better design to allow fish to pass through. This was done a number of years ago. The other work that's been led primarily by the Wild Salmon Center is establishing protected areas. So I'll touch a little bit on this. So each one of these circles here indicate an area where we've worked with the, in the case of Japan, with a private paper company, and in Russia with the local government to establish protected areas in upstream habitat, to protect spawning habitat. We're also working with the Marine Stewardship Council. I know that's kind of a dirty word here, but it's a it's an NGO that's been working with fishermen, commercial fishermen, and so there's now 2 certified fisheries. These are commercial fisheries that are now certified as sustainable, and they're now required to report bycatch every year, and so we're now getting at least some information on bycatch, and they're also doing additional work on monitoring escapement for pink and chum salmon, so they're getting better data collected from the field. And so those are 2 examples of conservation work now that's protecting taimen. This is that protected area I referred to in Japan. It's called the Serafutsu Environmental Conservation Forest. This is a map of the watershed. And all of the yellow area is now under permanent protection. It's owned, as I mentioned, by OG Paper Company, but they have agreed to not cut these areas. So this is riparian floodplain habitat, this broad yellow area here, and there's a lot of streamside or riparian habitat that's protected. These are where most of the spawning grounds occur. So this was a precedent-setting agreement between a major paper company and NGOs, both Japanese NGOs and the Wild Salmon Center. So this agreement was signed in 2009, and they've been very cooperative. They've supported some of our work in Japan, so it's I think quite a success story. We've also established with the regional government in Russia a protected area in the upper part of the Kopi. This is the one I mentioned, a much larger watershed, and a very large area in the upper part of the watershed is now under protection for taimen, and it also serves as habitat, as I mentioned, for Siberian tiger. This is just an example of how I haven't talked a lot about Russia, but I've spent some time doing some work in the Russian part of the range, and so these Soviet-era helicopters are how we get around. It's quite an adventure to travel on them. And then we get around with these boats here and rely on Russian guides to get us around. So this again is the Kopi River, another important river. This is a tip of the hat to Sergei Zolotukhin. So he's the field biologist that I've worked with. He's the head of the salmon lab for the Russian Fishery Agency. And just to put things in context, his area of jurisdiction is about the size of Oregon and Washington combined, and he's the only biologist. So he's the only one working in these streams, and there's very little he can do. He has very little support. And so we've been able to support some of his work, and he's extremely knowledgeable about these fish, so it's been really a great opportunity to get to know him. And with his help, we've been able to start a tagging program. It's off to a very slow start, but we're hoping that we can get more interest working with fishing guides working in Russia. So this is again a taimen with a T-bar tag here, and the idea is to try to estimate the population using market capture. So tag a number of fish, release them, and then rely on recoveries in the sport fishery to get more information about that population. Okay, so final shift here before I wrap things up. So I mentioned at the beginning that there's 5 species, so I just want to give you a little bit more background on some of these other species and tell you a little bit about the state of play for these other species. So we'll get, this is Asia. This is the range of sea-run or sockling taimen here. So again, this is Russia and Japan. There's 5 other species. There's a European species here called the Danube salmon or the Danube taimen, and they're found in just that one watershed, Danube, and they're also considered endangered, and their population has been fragmented primarily from dams. There's a number of Europeans that have been doing studies on that species. I was able to travel to Chengdu, which is in the basically central part of China in Sichuan province. There is one taimen found in the upper part of the Yangtze River, and this one is extremely endangered. There's probably only 200 or 300 fish left. Its habitat is it's where pandas are found, believe it or not. And it's only found in 2 separate streams. I got to see one of them in a hatchery. It's pretty bleak. I don't know if those fish are going to be around much longer. And then there's an even more mysterious one found only in North Korea, Kucho Ishikawa or Korean taimen, and basically nothing is known about those. The range extends a little bit into China, but there's nobody really knows the status of that population. And then finally, there's Siberian taimen, and so if you look on the internet and Google taimen, you'll probably find pictures of these fish. There's a very popular fishery in Mongolia and also in the Russian Far East for these species. These are, again, just freshwater resident, but they're recognized as the largest of the group. So we did, through the IUCN process, we described status of all of these, and we basically concluded they're all threatened. And as I mentioned, this is listed, the Korean taimen is listed as data deficient because we don't have any information about that species at all. This is the group that's helped me out. This is a conference that we held. I don't know why the fish is upside down here, but this is our fish flag. These are Japanese, Russians, Mongolians, North Americans, Europeans, all kind of experts in the field. It was a really exciting meeting to pull everyone together and share, compare notes and share knowledge about these fish. This is a similar set of data on bycatch. This is for another species, Siberian taimen I mentioned, in the lower Amur River. Same kind of thing. These are fishery, again, targeting pink and chum salmon, primarily chum salmon. And then the rate of bycatch has been declining. It suggests that the population has been declining over a number of years. That's about all the information we have on the long-term trends in the population for this species. And just, kind of one interesting anecdote. These are the same species, Siberian taimen, found in 2 different locations. This is in Mongolia. Olaf Jensen is a Rutgers University professor. He's been doing a lot of work on the fish in the Mongolian part of the range. You see all these pictures of these fish. They tend to be very long and skinny. It's kind of almost snake-like. And in the Russian Far East, you see the same species that are very much more deeper bodied and appearing to be much better fed. So we think that one of the primary differences is that these fish, when they get to this size, can probably feed on adult pink salmon, which is fascinating. I've heard reports of this. I've never seen any direct evidence of it. But certainly given their size and the size of their mouth, their gape, they would be capable of feeding on prey that size. And so this is the anadromous zone. So these are where the fish are close enough to the Pacific Ocean where they can feed on a very abundant returning Pacific salmon. So that's, anyway, a theory we have. But these are, yeah, fascinating fish, and again, very little work has been done. So this is a picture, again, of Siberian taimen. This was a picture taken by an angler in Mongolia. And so I've been just spending a lot of time trying to get people interested in these fish and supporting more research and more conservation. And so we're trying to do that. These are, again, the species that we've been able to describe and describe their current status. And we're also, as I mentioned in Japan, throughout the range of all the species, we're encouraging sustainable fishing practices, so catch and release practices, using gear that doesn't damage the fish, trying to act responsibly, trying to protect the fish. So that's all I've got. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
How long lived are they, like a 5-year cycle, or?
They can. The oldest ones have been aged at 30 years.
So they can come multiple.
Yeah, they. Yeah, they. I don't know if they go every year, but they can repeat spawns. They can spawn more than once, and they mature at about 6 or 7 years old. That's when they start spawning, and then they can.
About how long are they at that age?
They're probably 70 centimeters, 60 to 70 centimeters. Yeah.
Large size salmon marine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the fish that we're monitoring, the smallest ones are maybe 50 to 60 centimeters are the smallest individuals. Yeah. Yes.
So this is kind of counter to your message, but have you eaten them? Are they any good?
That fish that I showed you that we recovered from a poacher's net, we ate. Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're okay. But they're, very old fish, so the quality of the flesh is maybe not quite.
Not that oily or
It's not very oily.
Is it
Yeah,
what
the
color?
eggs were good.
what color is it?
It's like light pink. Yeah. Yeah.
The color of the eggs?
They look like salmon eggs.
So they're red, okay.
Yeah, orangey reddish. Yeah. Yeah.
Because like Dolly Varden eggs are like almost white.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These were much. Yeah. These look like salmon eggs.
So, the colors there, you got a red and a silver one, is that definite of the sex of them?
Yeah. Yeah. So the males are very clearly red. Red from the gill plate all the way down to the tail. And then the females have a little, you can see maybe a little reddish color. But it's, the males are much brighter red.
Have you observed a completed red before they spawn? And how, I was curious how deep the red is. They don't look like they're much of a red compared to Pacific salmon.
The Japanese have a few papers I could share. They described all the egg pockets and the egg depth. And I don't know how to compare with. And it's amazing. Yeah, I think within about a month, they lose all that color. So the males. I mean, when they're caught lower in the fishery, they're still kind of a little bit red, but they rapidly lose all that color after spawning.
And the kite kind of recedes too?
Yeah, they don't really have much of a kite. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you saw these guys going way in the upper stream.
Yeah.
What's the shallowest you ever saw one?
Yeah, I mean, this is, they're in.
Is that a shallow, I mean, what's the shallowest?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, their backs are almost up. I mean,
Almost, but not
Yeah.
out of the water.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but it's quite shallow. Yes.
Do you usually see two of them hanging out together like that, male and female, or
During the spawning season,
during the spawning season?
Yeah. Yeah, we noticed that, the males, like it has been shown in many other salmonids, the males show up early, and then the females come a little bit later. So
You don't have competition among males like you have with.
you do.
There is a.
Oh, yeah.
The little ones coming in to spawn, like, precocious males.
Yeah, there's some smaller males that are basically down a little bit farther downstream, and then, the Japanese photographers have filmed the male fighting, and it's amazing. You can see some of the video, and in pictures. It's, yeah, really clear, shallow water, and males fighting for access to females. So, yeah. Yes.
You got quite a range you covered in looking at all these fish.
Uh-huh.
So, when you hear a little rustle in the bushes or something, which location gets your heart going the fastest? Bears around here, or tigers, or Chinese gorillas, or what gets you going most when you're in some of these different streams?
There's brown bears here, but I've seen tracks. I haven't seen any. I've never seen a tiger. The guides I've worked with have seen them on the bank. They're on the river, and they've seen them on the bank. And there's brown bears in Russia. My colleague got attacked and defended himself with a knife, killed a bear with a knife. Yeah. And there's Himalayan black bears too, the ones with the white.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen those from a distance.
Do you think they're all eating the salmon or the salmon?
I'm really fascinated to know if the tigers are, but certainly bears are, all
Are there
bears
wolves?
are feeding on them.
Are there wolves and?
There aren't in the rivers we work in, no.
And then, is it true that the Siberian taimen eat rodents
Yes. Yeah.
off the bank? That's amazing.
Yes, so especially during flood events and there's, like mice and rodents swimming, they'll take it. And people, fish with big flies. So, we've seen, I think these fish do it too, I've never observed it, but there's been some diet studies and they found mice in the stomachs of these fish. So,
That's probably why they don't taste very good.
probably. Doesn't help, I don't think.
Well, I've seen shrews in Salmon in Alaska,
Yeah.
freshwater salmon.
Okay, yeah, I think it probably happens more than we think.
So these guys, when they're spawning, they still are feeding on their spawning run?
No. Well, we don't
know?
feed.
Or not too sure? Or?
Not too, well, I mean, they're, based on our observations, we don't see any feeding. But, I mean, they might be feeding in the lower river before they get up to the spawning grounds. And then after spawning, they are feeding actively they're down to the estuary, within a couple days, and then they're feeding there. Yes?
Did you say that the freshwater version are really big fish too?
Right, yes. So the Kopi River, that Russian river we work in, these were fish that were well over 3 feet long. And we looked at their otoliths, they didn't spend any time in the ocean. So we think that's a productive enough system. There's a lot of, they're primarily eating fish, big fish. But they can get big without having to go to the ocean.
I found it, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's enough fishermen here to maybe help with that, but your comment about how a marine conservation organization is a bad thing here, or a bad thing to say. I found that kind of a,
Right.
I don't,
Are you familiar with MSC?
not MSC, no, but,
Do a little reading.
so it's a real specific to that
Kind of an
organization.
extortion group.
Oh, it's a specific to that group. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with it is that the criteria make a lot of sense, and it's been under review by a lot of people that fishery scientists and fishery managers. But there's a process of applying it, and there's it gets a little funky. There's a lot of subjectivity about scoring and during the process, and there's some problems with the process. The criteria, again, I think make a lot of sense, but application, there's problems. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pete.
Yes.